Speaker, I'll tell you what's not clean: First Nation drinking water. The government has cut $186 million from the First Nation Water and Wastewater Action Plan and sunsetted the entire program. Last year, the Auditor General roundly criticized this government for ignoring her decade of calls for greater investment to provide First Nations with the basic services other Canadians have become used to. Can the government explain how cutting the water program addresses the Governor-General's calls for expedited action into drinking water, including to the more than 100 communities still suffering under...
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Improving access to safe drinking water on reserve is a top shared priority for this government and for First Nations communities across the country. We have made significant investments in two important regards: capacity, reporting, monitoring and maintenance of water infrastructure on reserve, and critical water for water infrastructure on reserve. Yesterday, we did introduce the Safe Drinking Water for First Nations Act to create enforceable standards that will guide future investments in water infrastructure and its related activities on reserve.
Member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. The government did table its latest version of the First Nation drinking water law. The bill actually provides no real standards, no timeline, and no funding guarantees. Contrary to the promised new way of doing business with First Nations, the new law will not require government to consult First Nations on the water standards and rules. First Nations and legal and technical experts say regulations without resources are meaningless. Can this government explain why it's requiring First Nations to ensure better water standards in the same breath it's yanking the monies needed to comply?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I can tell the member that our Water Action Plan has resulted in real improvements in water systems on reserves, for example, by increasing and improving training and certification for First Nation operators and managers, one of the essential components to a comprehensive water strategy for First Nations, and we remain committed to ensuring First Nations people on reserve have access to the same quality of safe drinking water as all Canadians. That's why we've reintroduced this important piece of legislation, building on our government's unprecedented investments in water and wastewater infrastructure.
The Honourable Member